The hum of first class was soft. Chilled towels, quiet murmurs, a faint clink of glassware. Olivia Bennet had just unzipped her leather laptop sleeve when her daughter, Emma, leaned over. "Mom, can I go to the restroom?" she asked, voice polite but urgent. Chloe, her twin, piped up right behind her. "Me too, I really have to." Olivia glanced at the front lavatory, barely 8 steps away. "Of course, honey. One at a time, remember?" Emma smiled, unbuckled, and walked confidently toward the restroom. She passed the galley where a blonde flight attendant, mid-50s, was arranging napkins. No issue. Olivia exhaled. So far, so good. Emma returned moments later, whispering, "It smells like eucalyptus in there." Chloe grinned and stood, brushing imaginary crumbs off her little white cardigan. But this time, the same flight attendant stepped directly into her path. "Excuse me," the woman said, sharp but smiling. "That restroom is for first-class passengers only." Chloe froze, one foot slightly lifted, like she'd forgotten how to walk. I'm seated in 1C, she said, pointing back at Olivia. "I see," the flight attendant replied, looking her over. "Are you traveling with someone?" Olivia's chair scraped back. She stood calm but firm. "She's with me. I'm her mother." The attendant blinked, her smile faltering for just a breath. "Oh, I didn't realize. These were your children." The pause before children didn't go unnoticed. "No problem," the woman added quickly. "I'll check on the cabin behind you." She walked off. Chloe turned, cheeks pink. "Did I do something wrong, Mom?" Olivia knelt beside her, one hand on her shoulder. "No, sweetheart. You did absolutely nothing wrong. But inside something was already shifting, something cold, something focused." And Olivia Bennet, descendant of the airline's founding family, was just getting started. Olivia helped Chloe settle back into her seat, smoothing the front of her cardigan and tucking a strand of blonde hair behind her ear. The cabin around them had already moved on. Glasses refilled, tablets flickering to life, and soft jazz trickling through overhead speakers. But not Olivia. She reclined her seat slightly, opened her laptop, and stared at the screen, pretending to focus on a quarterly earnings report from BioCore, the pharmaceutical client she'd been sent to Honolulu to consult with. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. She wasn't reading a word. That moment, the pause, the glance, the way the flight attendant had said, "Your children," like it needed clarification. It wasn't loud, it wasn't violent, but Olivia had spent 2 decades working in communications, she knew the power of tone, of micro-expression, of things that passed in a second but landed like a slap. And her daughter had felt dead. She glanced sideways. Chloe was quiet now, staring out the window at the rolling clouds, a wrinkle between her brows she usually only wore during piano lessons or when her twin sister beat her at chess. Across the aisle, another flight attendant, a younger man, Asian, maybe early 30s, walked past with a tray of drinks. He offered a brief nod to Olivia, polite and neutral. No smirk, no glance. Good. She closed her laptop. This wasn't over, not because she needed to make a scene. Olivia didn't do scenes, she did strategy. And something told her this flight might require both. She reached into her tote and pulled out a sleek silver device, small, discreet, pressed a button, a faint red dot lit up. Voice recorder on. It wasn't paranoia, it was preparation. She turned back to her daughters, forcing her tone light. All right, cookies will be coming soon. You know what that means. Emma perked up. Warm ones? With melty chocolate, Olivia smiled, but her eyes flicked forward toward the galley. Sandra, the flight attendant, was there, chatting, laughing, pouring wine into real glass for the older gentleman 2 rows up. She didn't glance back once, but Olivia was watching and recording. Because the first crack had appeared, and cracks had a way of spreading. The cabin had settled into that familiar cruise phase rhythm. Cabin lights dimmed to soft amber, window shades half lowered, and the gentle clink of silverware replacing the roar of takeoff. Chloe had said nothing for nearly 20 minutes. Emma, as always, was the first to bounce back, scrolling through her in-flight movie options, debating between Encanto or National Geographic. But Chloe just sat still, hands in her lap, glancing occasionally at the restroom door up front. Then came the moment. I have to go again, she whispered to Olivia. Her voice was firmer this time, less uncertain. Olivia looked at her daughter carefully. Do you want me to come with you? Chloe shook her head once. I'm okay. Olivia paused. This was her daughter's choice, her moment to reclaim something small but real. All right, sweetheart, she said. You'll remember what to say if anyone asks. Chloe nodded. I belong in first class. I'm in seat 1C. That's right, Olivia said, squeezing her hand. Go ahead. She watched Chloe stand up straighter than before, take 2 steady steps forward, and disappear behind the restroom door without incident. No one stopped her for a breath. Olivia allowed herself to relax, but just as quickly her gaze shifted. From the side galley, Sandra returned. The flight attendant spotted Chloe as she stepped out of the lavatory and immediately altered course, heading straight toward her. "Excuse me," Sandra's voice rang out, a little too loud for the quiet cabin. "Did you just use this restroom?" Olivia was already reaching into her tote before Chloe could even answer. Phone in hand, voice recorder still on. She rose slowly. "She did," Olivia said calmly. "And unless you'd like to continue this conversation on the tarmac, I suggest you stop questioning my daughter's right to be here." Sandra hesitated, then smiled tightly. It was just a misunderstanding. Olivia gave no reply. She was too busy memorizing every word, every gesture, cataloging it like evidence. Because this wasn't about a bathroom anymore. This was about something far older. Something every woman in her family had been trained to recognize. When they try to make you feel like you don't belong. And Olivia Bennett was done playing polite. Olivia settled back into her seat, phone resting discreetly in her palm. The screen still glowed faint red. The recorder was capturing every breath, every syllable. Chloe leaned against her shoulder. "Was she mad at me?" the girl asked softly. "No, baby," Olivia whispered, smoothing Chloe's hair. "She was scared I'd say something she didn't want people to hear. And she would, just not yet." Across the aisle, the businessman in 2D, older, white, Armani suit, glanced over again. He didn't say anything, but the way his brow furrowed said it all. He saw it too. That mattered. Every ally mattered. Sandra passed their row again, this time without speaking. Her stride stiff, her smile tighter than before. Olivia noted it all. She had trained interns for years how to read a room, how to catch what wasn't said. And right now, Sandra Wheeler was broadcasting nerves in high definition. From the corner of her eye, Olivia saw her in the galley, leaning in close to the male flight attendant, Marcus, whispering fast. He didn't nod, didn't look amused. Instead, Marcus stole a glance over at Olivia. She held his gaze, neutral, calm, but in her eyes, "I know." As Sandra turned away to prep the next round of drinks, Marcus approached Olivia's row. "Can I get you ladies anything else? Maybe some juice for the girls?" "Ginger ale would be great," Olivia replied with a polite smile, "and maybe one more sparkling water for me." "Coming right up." He disappeared into the galley, but moments later, Sandra returned with the drinks herself. She placed them on the tray table with practiced efficiency. No napkins this time, no smile either. "Your beverages," she said flatly. "Thank you," Olivia replied, voice steady. She didn't blink, didn't flinch. Instead, she tapped the corner of her phone screen, saving the last recording segment. Sandra had just handed her 2 more minutes of documented bias on a silver tray, and she hadn't even realized it. That was the thing about people who thought you didn't belong. They never watched their tone when they thought no one was listening. But Olivia Bennett? She was listening to everything. The cabin dimmed slightly as the sun dipped lower over the Pacific, casting a soft golden glow through the oval windows. Most passengers had settled into movies or shut-eye, but Olivia, she was wide awake, wired in a way that had nothing to do with caffeine. Marcus passed by again, this time slower. His eyes flicked to Olivia's tray table, where her phone rested screen down. He paused just a beat. "I'll be checking on the main cabin," he said casually, but his tone had changed. Warmer, lower, measured. "Appreciate it," Olivia replied, equally casual. Their exchange lasted 3 seconds, but to someone fluent in the language of subtext, it was crystal clear. He knew, and more importantly, he didn't agree with Sandra. When he returned 20 minutes later, it wasn't just with ginger ale refills. He leaned down slightly, resting the drink tray gently. "I saw what happened earlier," he murmured, barely above a whisper. "You're not imagining it." Olivia kept her eyes on the drink, her expression neutral. "Thank you for saying that." He nodded once and moved on, just a whisper. But it carried weight. Olivia glanced at her daughters, both now curled under soft blankets, headphones on, sharing a tablet screen. They looked peaceful, but peace shouldn't have to be earned with restraint. It should be given freely. That whisper from Marcus, it was her first real confirmation that this wasn't all in her head, that someone else saw it too. And for a woman like Olivia Bennett, that's all she needed. The wheels in her mind had already begun to turn. The facts were lining up, the voice recordings were solid, and the moment was coming. The moment Sandra Wheeler would realize she'd picked the wrong woman and the wrong daughters to make feel small. The seatbelt sign blinked on with a soft ding. The captain's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're beginning our initial descent into Honolulu. Please return to your seats and ensure your tray tables are stowed." Olivia didn't move. She sat upright, calm, composed, and deliberate. Sandra walked by, doing her final cabin check. Her smile once smug, had turned mechanical, forced. But she still didn't look Olivia in the eye. Fine, Olivia didn't need eye contact. She needed accountability. She reached into the front pocket of her tote and pulled out a slim, dark leather case. Inside was a card very few people on Earth possessed. Black matte finish. Gold embossed logo, Pacific Skies, Founders Jubilee. She placed it flat on a tray table like a quiet threat. Sandra passed by again, paused when she saw it, then froze, her lips parted slightly. That card wasn't just rare, it was generational, issued only to direct descendants of the airline's founders. It didn't expire, it didn't require miles, and it overrode protocol. Olivia finally looked up. Calm. You may want to notify the captain, she said softly, before this becomes a bigger problem. Sandra opened her mouth, closed it, then disappeared toward the cockpit. Across the aisle, the businessman, who'd seen everything, leaned closer. I knew I recognized that card, he muttered with a quiet smile. You're a Bennett. Olivia gave a polite nod. Still am. Outside the window, Honolulu was coming into view. But for Sandra Wheeler, her landing had already begun. The plane touched down with a soft jolt, rubber meeting runway, reverse thrusters humming, passengers jolting gently in their seats. But the real turbulence, it was still ahead. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Honolulu, the captain's voice echoed over the intercom. Please remain seated as we taxi to the gate. Olivia stayed still, the Founder's Jubilee card resting openly on her tray. Sandra hadn't returned since disappearing toward the cockpit. That silence, it spoke volumes. As the aircraft slowed to a stop at the gate, a second announcement came, this time unexpected. Folks, we ask that all passengers remain seated. We'll begin deplaning shortly. Whispers filled the cabin. Olivia's phone buzzed. She glanced down known caller. She answered calmly, Miss Bennett. Yes. This is Brian Chu, Chief Operating Officer of Pacific Skies. I understand there's been an incident on board. Olivia didn't flinch. There has, and it was recorded. We're placing the crew under temporary suspension pending internal review. I want to personally apologize and ensure your daughters are escorted safely off the aircraft. Now, it was right now, she said. I want this documented properly and handled publicly. Quiet fixes aren't accountability. Understood, Brian replied after a beat. We're flying 2 executives to meet you at your hotel tonight. HR will begin interviews immediately. The call ended. Across the aisle, Marcus passed by slowly, avoiding eye contact with Sandra, who now stood rigid near the galley, her arms crossed tight, her eyes focused nowhere. The doors opened, but no one moved until Olivia did. She rose calmly, gestured for her daughters to follow. And in that still tense cabin, no one questioned why the last person off that plane was the one with the most power. The jet bridge was oddly quiet for a gate that had just received a full flight. Most passengers were whispering or glancing back at the aircraft as they rolled their carry-ons toward baggage claim. But Olivia? She wasn't heading for luggage. A uniformed Pacific Skies operations manager stood waiting just past the exit. "Ms. Bennett?" he asked, voice lower than necessary. "Oh, we've arranged a private conference room. The captain will meet you there shortly." She nodded once. "My daughters come with me." Of course. The 3 of them were escorted through a side hallway, past security doors, into a glass-walled room with a view of the very aircraft they had just left. The plane, Flight 742, still sat idle at the gate. Gate crew weren't loading new passengers. No catering truck had pulled up. No cleaning crew stepped aboard. It wasn't moving. The plane had been quietly grounded. A moment later, Captain Reynolds entered, tall, composed, but visibly uncomfortable. She removed her cap, nodded respectfully to Olivia, and took a seat across from her. "I reviewed the incident report," she began, "and listened to part of the recording." Olivia didn't interrupt. "You'll hear her words, tone, and what she said to your male attendant after she thought I wasn't listening." Reynolds nodded, taking the phone with care. Back on the tarmac, the plane door remained open. Passengers had deplaned, but Flight 742 wasn't going anywhere, because sometimes justice starts with a standstill. And Olivia Bennett had made sure the world, starting with Pacific Skies, felt every second of it. The next morning, Olivia sat by the window of her hotel suite, a coffee in one hand and her phone in the other. The twins were still asleep, curled into the plush white duvets, their matching pajamas slightly rumpled, their breathing soft. She'd barely slept, not because of nerves, but because she'd spent the night drafting an email that was now making its way through the inboxes of Pacific Skies, executive team, legal department, and board chair. Subject line: documented discriminatory behavior, immediate action required. It included a transcript of the recording, timestamps, flight information, and a clear breakdown of how Olivia, a direct heir to the airline's founding family, and her daughters had been treated not as VIP passengers, not even as humans. Within 30 minutes, her phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't an assistant. It was Richard Callahan, CEO. "Ms. Bennett," he began, "I'm calling to apologize and to ask for a meeting in person." Olivia didn't soften. "Not for an apology, for a policy overhaul, public-facing, transparent. Yes, that's exactly what we want to discuss." "Good," she said, "because a quiet PR fix won't do." Down in the lobby, two representatives from Pacific Skies were already waiting. They didn't bring flowers. They didn't bring gift baskets. They brought a legal liaison and a compliance officer. Olivia smiled, faintly. That was the tone shift she'd been waiting for. Because when the company realized who she really was, not just a mother on a flight, but a woman who could speak, document, and act, they didn't just change their voices, they changed their strategy. And now, she was just getting started. 2 weeks later, a quiet shift rippled across the airline industry, starting with a headline. Pacific Skies announces new presumption of belonging policy after in-flight incident. It trended within hours. The policy? Simple on paper, profound in practice. All frontline crew would undergo updated training focused on unconscious bias, situational respect, and the assumption that every passenger belongs until proven otherwise, not the reverse. In the internal memo leaked to press, the training module was nicknamed the Bennett Standard. Olivia read it from her office in Seattle, legs crossed, tablet glowing in her lap, sunlight pouring through the floor-to-ceiling windows. She didn't smile, not quite, but her jaw unclenched. The girls were at school. Life had mostly returned to normal, but the incident had left its mark on all of them. Even Emma, normally the bolder twin, still asked sometimes, "Mom, do you think they'd stop us again if we flew first class tomorrow?" And Olivia always answered the same, "They might, but they won't get away with it." That was the legacy she'd fought for. Not just protection for her daughters, but for every kid who got side-eyed. When they walked into a room they'd rightfully earned a place in. A knock at the door pulled her from the thought. It was a delivery. She opened the box slowly, unfolding layers of navy tissue until her fingers touched something solid. A custom-framed certificate from Pacific Skies, inscribed "In recognition of Olivia Bennett for making us better." Underneath, in smaller print, "They belonged the moment they boarded." For the first time in weeks, Olivia allowed herself to breathe deeply. Because justice wasn't just about calling it out. It was about changing what came next. It was a rainy Sunday when Olivia finally let it all settle. The girls were in the den, sprawled on the rug with the puzzle, soft music playing in the background. The scent of cinnamon rolls drifted from the kitchen, and the world, at least in their home, felt peaceful again. Olivia sat at the window, tea in hand, watching raindrops race each other down the glass. Her phone buzzed face down on the table. She didn't reach for it right away. For once, she wasn't waiting for an update, a headline, or a reply. The headlines had already done their work. The tweets had slowed. The think pieces had been written. But more importantly, the policy had been signed. She'd read the final version 3 times. And while her name wasn't on it officially, it was everywhere between the lines. At school, Emma's teacher had used the story as part of a civics discussion. Chloe had come home shyly, saying, "Someone asked if we were those twins." Olivia had kissed her forehead and simply said, "Yes, and I'm proud of that." It hadn't fixed everything. It wasn't supposed to, but it had made a dent, a deliberate, visible one, and maybe, just maybe, next time, a kid who looked like they didn't belong wouldn't be questioned at all. Across the room, Emma looked up. "Mom?" "Yes, baby. Next time we fly, can we sit in economy and see if anything happens?" Olivia raised an eyebrow. "You want to test them?" Emma grinned. "Not test, just watch." Olivia laughed softly, the sound low and steady. She didn't raise children to stay quiet. She raised them to notice, to ask, and, when necessary, to change the rules. And now, they were watching the sky differently. 6 months later, Olivia stood alone at Gate C-18, watching another Pacific Skies plane taxi to the terminal. She wasn't flying today. She was speaking. Inside the airport's new employee training center, named in quiet tribute the Bennett Room, a class of new hires waited to hear from the woman who had, without fanfare, helped reshape the company's culture. She wasn't nervous. She was steady, grounded. Behind her, 2 familiar footsteps padded across the polished floor. Emma and Chloe, now nearly 12, walked up in their matching navy jackets. They weren't quiet little girls anymore. You read